All right, so I've done a bit of work on Grafana and Prometheus and everything like that. This is coming from Edge. We're still working on getting everything up and running and stable, but here's an example dashboard that we could make for everything else. Basically, it just sort of has some service level graphs, that sort of clue me in onto the health of the service in general, right? So we can see in the upper right-hand corner the number of pods that are currently, that the service is currently scaled to. We can see the average number of fan outs per message. That should clue us in onto any issues with the model. We can see the rate of sort of fan outs by pod. So we could see all the spikes, and if we go a long period of time with no activity, that could be indicative of it's just not processing things correctly. We're able to see the number of errors. The cool thing about the number of errors is this is actually grepping off of our logs coming off of the pod. The other ones are coming off of Prometheus metrics. So we're able to have like this cool mix of pod logs and graphing those, as well as Prometheus metrics and graphing those. I was able to get RabbitMQ all hooked up, so we're able to see the number of ready messages in the Rabbit queue, as well as have a live tail of the logs as they come in. So that's just sort of like a sample dashboard, baby steps, still working on making this cool. And I also have a dashboard put out by Rabbit, by Cloud AMQP, nice. And we're able to now monitor our Rabbit queues in very great detail. It has all sorts of metrics. Things turn red as things are, starting to get concerning, right? Like this unroutable messages dropped per second. This would be something to potentially look into, right?
Oh, I thought that /s was the sarcasm.
What was that?
I thought the /s meant for sarcasm.
Yes.
Yeah, like
sarcasm per second.
Graphs. Yeah, so we have all sorts of information we can now get from RabbitMQ. The next steps to all of this are to clean everything up, make it very useful, potentially make like an ops center dashboard that sort of describes the health of everything at a high level, and then start alerting on all of this. So that's sort of where we're at.
And is the thought the alerting will go into like Slack or what's the alerting?
Alerting can go into Slack, PagerDuty, and it can even start to route into automated remediation pipelines, like a GitHub action, for example. So say we have a situation where event API is just not processing, and the first thing we always do is restart event API, right? When we get that alert, the GitHub action could restart event API, wait for a little bit, see if that clears the issue, and if not, then alert a human, right? Let's make our computers sort of continue to work for us, even in the cases of opsy things. So that's sort of where we're going to try to go with this.
Andrew,
go ahead, Jeff.
Go ahead, Scott. I want to ask a different question.
I was just going to say we could also, with our new status page, these are things Andrew and I have talked about potentially, depending on what's going on, pushing alerts there as well, as we need to. But that'll be kind of the third step, I guess, in this process.
Right.
On the other dashboard, is that Loki doing the logs, or is it something else?
Yeah, it's Loki doing the logs. So this errors and activity scoring is coming from Loki. Okay. And then these panels here are both coming from Loki.
Okay, cool.
I'm still trying to figure out the right way to identify errors coming from the logs. So we just have a panel of just errors. That looks like it's being a bit of a pain. Yeah, so
Cool.
that's where we're at.
Yeah, it's really cool. One other thing that came up last week, I think it's going to be really good to maybe do a lunch and learn or something on Loki and Grafana for everybody to get everybody comfortable again with the logging side of things. So something
Absolutely.
to put on the calendar as soon as we could.
Yeah. Another cool thing about Loki, right, is say you want to explore into the logs. It's really easy to do that. Let's see. So name would be equal. I could app. Yeah. Yeah. Whatever we say, event machine. Right, so we can look at all the logs from Event Machine, for example, and say we wanted to look at a specific thing, right? We can just kind of grep for it like that, and it'll, and then you can sort of string your greps along. So we have the ability to sort of live log or explore the logs pretty easily using the Grafana Explore option. So that's another way we can look into our logs and all that sort of stuff. That's about all I have. Any other questions, comments, thoughts?
Yeah, Andrew.
Possible? Sorry.
Go ahead, Carlos.
Yeah, so is it possible to check agent logs already, or?
Yeah, it should be. I would have to figure out, what do you want to look for?
I don't know, maybe exporting or something like that.
I don't know if this is pulling the right pod, but it'd be something like this, right? You just have your pod selector, your log selector, and then you can grep from there. You can also use regex and various things like that.
So this is only for our Kubernetes environment, right?
Yes.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Okay.
There's no reason though we couldn't build something that would export the on-premise logs back to Loki probably. I mean, it'd be work, but no reason we couldn't do that, right, Andrew?
I'm pretty sure we could do that. I'm not 100% sure how we would do that, but pretty sure, just like with Prometheus, right? You're able to sort of point Prometheus at, external services. I'm pretty sure you could do something similar with the logs of at least,
right,
uploading those logs to our loggers.
Right.
If we can do that, it would be great, because right now I've been using Kibana for a while, and I don't know, it just doesn't seem like an easy tool to use sometimes, and I don't know, this looks much better. So yeah, cool, thank you.
Yeah.
And yeah, Andrew, going back to the activity scoring dashboard, would we be able to get a dashboard of the errors broken out by like action we run? So like whether it be like a training or a score job.
Yep.
Nice. Cool.
Yeah, I mean, we can do anything we pretty much want with this. One of the cool things that I just found out about, Prometheus and Grafana and all that is the metric name itself you can match with regex. So we would be able to, pretty much graph all of the errors from any pod that sort of starts with, activity scoring dash run dash, and then go from there. We can graph them in exactly the same way, and visualize it, and yeah, so we can know exactly where we're having errors, and even turn it into a fun little card like this, where it's green if everything's fine and red if things are failing.
It seems like this is something pretty easily we could build a custom metric to expose like customer jobs, like customer exports that haven't run. I know Bert was asking me the other day about that. Like, it seems like that'd be pretty easy, right? We could have like even like a GraphQL, metric endpoint that would just literally go get all the, last timestamps of the last export per customer and just export that as a metric. And then you could chart it, you could create alarms, you could do all kinds of stuff, right? That once it's exposed into Grafana.
Yeah. So I guess the way you kind of do metrics, right, is you just have your metrics endpoint, and
the scraper
every time it hits,
scrape it.
Yep.
Right. That's what I'm saying. So we just created an endpoint, a Grafana endpoint on something like Graph that can just go custom query the database, get all the information returned as part of the scrape endpoint.
Yeah. Or, we can put it on the cloud agent itself, and, Prometheus will know how to scrape all of the cloud agents associated with it.
Cloud agents are going away though. So.
Well, sure. Just agent in general.
Right.
So that way it doesn't necessarily have to run a graph query every time. It's just more that the agents are keeping these sort of metrics in memory and, exposing them as needed or as requested.
The problem is not all the agents will be on-prem. I'm just using a very specific scenario, but I get what you're saying. But the problem is that not all agents will be on our network that can be scraped. So because we'll have self-managed agents as well. So It's kind of the database ends up being the better place for this. Even if we don't want to scrape it, we can come up with a different way, because we need to actually know if it's, because the database is what the app interacts with. And so even if the agent thinks it did it, but it's not updated in the database, the UI is not going to correctly work. Or but yeah, I get you.
Yeah, it would be pretty straightforward to make metrics endpoint that does that.
Yeah.
One of the cool things,
you can control how fast it scrapes and all that too, right? As part of your metric config.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
You can even set the timeout if you have like a long running scrape, you can set the timeout to be a little bit longer, so Prometheus doesn't freak out.
And the other option is like maybe John's kind of original metrics server that could just expose Grafana metrics endpoints, and then we don't put it on Graph. We still have to potentially use Graph, but we could have some other server where you just sort of build these reusable, or not reusable, but these metric sort of jobs effectively, or whatever they want to call them.
Yeah, and we did something similar with data science, where basically our data science programs are able to return just whatever metrics they want, and then that runner sort of control plane keeps track of everything and just sort of returns all of those to Prometheus every time Prometheus asks for them. So we're able to, every data science program is able to define their own custom metrics and manage them themselves, and the runner just exposes whatever it gets back. So
and some of this can maybe be done in the pipeline, at least for the specific case, like, because everything goes to the pipeline. What happens if you have like 10 pods and they're all returning metrics? Does it somehow know how to like aggregate them, or like how does that work?
So the way Prometheus works is you define a service monitor, and the service monitor is pointed at a service. The service knows all of the pods that match like the label selector, right? So Prometheus then just sort of enumerates through all of the pods that the service says it accounts for. So say the service says, I have 3 pods. Prometheus then goes through and scrapes all 3 pods. There are a bunch of labels that sort of get automatically added. Things like pod name and which node it's running on and all that. So Prometheus, if there were 10 pods, it would scrape all 10. And
but let me ask you, like in that scenario, if we'll say one pod had customer ID exported 5 minutes ago, and then another pod, because they're all obviously working as worker pools, another pod exported 1 minute ago, same customer ID. What would it do in that case?
So in that case, we would probably define the metric as a counter, right? An ever increasing counter with the customer ID as the label. So what we could do is sort of, say at 5 minutes ago, the counter is increased from whatever, 10 to 11, right? It's exported the 10th time to the 11th time. And then 1 minute ago, it would increase from 11 to 12, right? And we can base these most of these graphs are counters, right? And what we're really judging is the difference between the value of the counter at 2 time periods.
Okay.
So we would, yeah.
Okay. All right, cool. Thank you. Sorry.
Yep.
Sorry to get a little deep in that one, but that's good. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Andrew.
Thanks.
Who else on the Team Bolt? Got anything to show? Or should we move on?
I can show a little something.
We thought you were going to show us your new house.
That's coming. It needs more furniture first. But my office is done, so here we are. So I just wanted to show a quick little improvement that we did to retros that I wanted to make sure didn't get glossed over because it has some impacts in Data Manager in general. So as I've talked about before, we have like the smart creation and like these rapid updates where the UI can update before the database is done processing our update or our create. But in the case of adding retro votes, which is what I'm showing here, that had some problems because sometimes users click really fast to add a bunch, and between the clicks we were getting into a race condition with how we like resolve the changes with the database versus locally. So now Data Manager, in addition to all those smart creation features, there's also a pending state, so we can know for sure that a mutation is done pending and has been fully saved. So you can see here when I add a vote, it shows up in the UI instantly, but it's very subtle. But the UI is temporarily disabled while we're sort of reconciling that new vote. So even if you click, very rapidly, we only send as many as we can, as we can process effectively. So that prevents us from, letting you add 10 votes instead of 5, or letting you get negative votes or miscounting votes. So we used to have a lot of trouble with this. So that'll have, broad impacts in how we use Data Manager for mutations. So I'm in the process of thinking through retros where we need to kind of block some of this state and where we can get by without blocking it to make it as fast as possible. But that's just a new mechanism we have in Data Manager that helps kind of keep us in sync and provide some stability.
Nice. It's really nice.
Was it the same change that made the going between stages better as well, or was that something different?
That was actually that was a different problem, but still related to getting events back from Data Manager. So whenever we upgraded Data Manager last week, it definitely got us a lot of improvements in retros. Things like moving stages, yeah, like you mentioned, that used to be pretty troublesome, and now it's a lot better. We still have a couple weird eventing issues regarding changing stages, but it's miles ahead of where it was at the last time we demoed this.
Awesome. Yeah, it seems a lot more stable every time I've used it. Anything else on Team Bolt today? Should we move over to gold miners next?
All right, I'll do the first demo. I don't know if anybody else has a demo on our team, but I'll do the first one. I thought I would show update. I guess I'll share my desktop. All right, so let me know when you can see my screen. I'm going to run in the simulator. We haven't pushed this to Edge yet, but we will hopefully later today, but I'm just going to run in the simulator. So we've been trying to work out the new authorization flows. They're much more complicated in Jira, and we tried to come up with a least common denominator solution that would work for both on-premise Jira, self-managed Jira in your own cloud, but not behind the firewall necessarily, and then Atlassian.com or Jira.com, so kind of cloud version of Jira. There's a matrix of different what's supported for authorization, And a lot of it depends. If you're in the cloud, you can use OAuth 2, but that doesn't provide access to certain APIs like the Agile APIs yet, because they don't support that, which we need. If you're in, you can then use, for the cloud, you can then use basic authorization, but then that's not very stable. And you got to ask a user to either create an API token or give us their username and password, which we don't want. API tokens don't work on-premise, on-premise, disables basic authorization. I mean, there's like this myriad of depends on the version you're on, which you're deployed, all these 500 different, permutations. That makes kind of the setup and configuration and kind of what we do pretty challenging for Jira. So for Agent 4, we tried to come up with the least common denominator solution that would work across all of those. And what we've kind of landed on, which I'm going to demo, is the older OAuth 1 flow, authorization flow, which tends to work, which ends up working for both cloud and on-premise. In Jira, they're called application links. And I'm going to demo that today, and kind of the new flow. What makes also Jira a little bit more complicated, and for OAuth 1 flow itself, is that you have sort of, like I said, 3 sort of varying conditions. I guess kind of other integrations might have this, but they're not so complicated. With Jira, we have cloud, which is again Atlassian.com. We've got, you're running in your own cloud, but your own Jira instance, right? So that's like, hey, it's in the cloud, it's public accessible. We could use a cloud agent. We don't need customer doesn't need to install a self-managed agent. But again, it's kind of under your own control. So it's got its own set of conditions. And then there's behind the firewall Jira on-premise, or behind the firewall access. Jira is not available outside of your network. And that's kind of the third scenario. So what we're going to do, the new flow is going to, ask you, which one you're using. If I'm using cloud, it's going to just take me straight to, and I'll demo this in a second, but it's going to just take me straight to, okay, connect your cloud instance and just put your URL in like normal. But let me first start with a little bit more complicated scenario. I'm using my own systems or a third-party server. So in this case, we got a number of different additional things that we're going to have to ask you. If you're using Jira server behind a firewall or it's not publicly accessible, then you need to have a cloud agent. So of course we have to then check, do you have a cloud agent set up? Because if you don't have one set up, we can't communicate to it. And so you have to first do that. So this sort of will do a check, and then it will disable this option if you don't have the setup. And then if I click the setup button in the real app, it would actually navigate you to the agent setup screen or the self-managed agent setup screen. But obviously in the simulator, it's going to show you that you've done that. There's also the case where maybe you've got an agent set up, but it's not currently running. So in that case, we can't send commands to it to have it do things on our behalf, because it's obviously not running, even though it is set up. So just to simulate that, I'll just show you real quick. I can basically, in the simulator, I can sort of show that. So like in this case, if I let React do its thing, okay, your agent is set up, but it's not running in this case. And then of course, if I flip this to true, slightly different case. So in this case, obviously it's now set up and running, and I can choose that agent. Pretty much in any one of these cases, the kind of end result is going to be similar. I'm going to land on this page, but what kind of happens behind the scenes is a little bit different. We kind of got to know, do we target an agent, or do we target a cloud agent, depending on kind of the what flows you went through. But once you get to kind of this case, we're going to kind of do the rest. So you're going to put your URL into your instance. You're going to click validate. We have to be able to do that because we have to validate that that's a reachable instance. In the case of an on-premise agent, what happened behind the scenes, they actually sent it to the on-premise agent to have that agent actually do the connection, because it could be behind the firewall and only accessible to the agent, not to us. So we can't use like Graph API or Auth API to do that. We had to send it to the agent. So that's what happened when I did that. Then it's going to give us kind of this URL. This URL is already on my clipboard. So when I click begin setup, what it's going to do, depending on where my location of my agent is, it's going to take me straight to the screen. Now in the normal case, what I would do is I would type in some URL, and I'll just show it to you so you can see how terrible it is. I'm going to type in some sort of URL. I don't know, pinpoint.com. Let's say I'm going to create a link. And then what it's going to do is it's going to give me this very confusing set of dialogues. As you can see here, notice how it did it twice. before it then gives you this dialogue, which is completely horrible. You got to remember to check all these various things, check the right stuff, and then it's going to give you another 2 more dialogues, which I won't do just to spare everybody, but it's super confusing. Any one of these things aren't checked correctly, it fails. You know, we can't communicate. We don't know why we can't communicate. It's just it's a really bad user experience. So what we've done is we've created a URL automatically for you. And what we did is we spent the last few days reverse engineering Jira's protocols between Jira products. You'll notice if I do like Confluence or Crowd or any of the built-in Jira products, you don't have to go through this mess. They just automatically like configure themselves. So we were able to like, through a series of Wireshark and HAR files and a bunch of other stuff, we were able to reverse engineer their protocol, which both includes XML documents and JSON documents, if you can probably imagine. We were able to create, we give you this sort of unique URL that you put in, which we obviously put on the clipboard. If you create link here, then what's going to happen? Oh, it didn't work. Whoa, that's super interesting. That should have actually done something completely different. Okay, that's weird. Okay, that's not working. So we must, oh, you know what? Someone deployed, crap. Chris deployed an Edge update this morning and it overrode our changes on Edge. So crap. Okay, so I'll have to come back and do this, redemo this in a few. Maybe I can publish the updated version. But yeah, we don't have this running. So it's not responding because we published over our patch deployment on Edge. So I'll come to, why don't I pause and we'll move on to someone else and I'll come back to this and finish the demo while I redeploy.
Sounds good. Anyone else on Gold Miners have anything today? No. Okay, over to Team Now finally then. What have we got over there?
Yeah, I can go. Let me share my screen here. Hold on a second. See that okay?
Yep.
All right. So working on some prototyping out for the new daily view, what we were calling Stand Up Plus Plus about a week ago, but the daily view. So one of the concepts of the daily view is the notebook, and inside the notebook are blocks of text. And so I prototyped this out yesterday where I'm taking the compose component that we have in the activity feed, and I'm dropping it onto a page, and you can have multiple ones. So like if you'll see here, I've got 3 different messages. I can click on it, and then you'll see the typical compose message that we have like in the activity feed, and then zooms in my way. Hold on, move this. Okay, and then anyway, you can have it in multiple spots. You can rearrange it. So if you have a bunch of different messages, you'll be able to rearrange it. And that's about as far as I got yesterday. But you'll be able to do things like add another block, pick the type of block. Right now, these are all text type blocks, but we might have some that are special, maybe like a questionnaire type thing or an image that we would handle differently. So kind of similar to Notion, I guess, in a little bit. I'm imagining something like when you hover over, there'll be some other tools. You can click on this and have some other tools and options where you can pick the type of block and that kind of stuff.
That's really cool. How portable would this be in the application? So the reason I ask is we were working with some customers yesterday, and in regard to the retro, they wanted to see some first order content that they could push to a retro. Like they want to be able to take notes, they wanted to be able to attach files, and then be able to see that in the retro report as well. Is this something that would be pretty portable so that we could leverage this, anywhere that we wanted it as a component?
Yeah, I mean, right now this is a UIC component, so it's a standalone component, a notebook component. So yeah, you could add this notebook component to the retro. I would probably kind of think of it a different way, though. I would think of it kind of if you're taking notes in the retro, it should be in your daily log anyway. So maybe there's a concept where we bring in your daily log during the retro. I don't know. We can talk about it. There's a couple different ways to think about it. But
Yeah, however we solve it, it's a good idea because it's something we've wanted to do. As if I've done a retro, I've wanted to be able to take sort of notes and then, but not necessarily them be action items. Like I just want to like kind of summarize the narrative. But to your point, Rick, however we kind of like make the UX works, because that would ideally also be in your daily as well. But I like that idea. Yeah.
Rick, how did you do the drag and drop for this?
I use React drag and drop.
Yeah, does it have like the drag and drop backend as part of the component?
The HTML5 backend, whatever it's called. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so if we want this to be portable, we'd have to move the backend out of the component because you can't have multiple in the DOM at once. So like you couldn't put this alongside the retro because of its drag and drop thing. So we'd have to sort of make the backend come from the app, but then this should be able to be stuck anywhere, even if there's an existing drag and drop already on the screen.
I see what you're saying. Yeah, that's fine. We could make that configurable. Just pass it in, and if it's not passed in, then we use one or something. Is that kind of what you're suggesting?
Yeah, definitely. It'll be very, very like plug and play if we can pass in the existing backend like from retros, so that we don't have two initialized at once.
Right. I know you can have multiple drop sources. So
yeah.
The other thing is we could, Keegan, talk about moving the drag and drop stuff that's in retro to UIC, so we're kind of sharing it in different spots. But we can that's an implementation deal too. We can chat about that. I don't know what that means for retro, but
what's cool about this too is like thinking about the attachment side of this, because it would be useful even in the notebook scenario. If I wanted to drag a PRD or screenshot or something like that into my notebook, and it could create like a little attachment depending on obviously the MIME type, because that could solve the sort of because one of the requests is also like they wanted to attach some of their stuff to the retro, like external content. But that could just be another block, right, Rick?
Right.
Another block type.
Exactly. Yep. Cool. And what I'm picturing is like when you drag something on like that, we'll just detect like the type of thing as much as we can, and then kind of suggest the block.
That's cool. Yeah, because even if we know it's a PDF, you could like show a little thumbnail or whatever. But if we know it's an image, then we just kind of unfurl the image and show the image or whatever. We do some of that in Compose. That's cool.
And as far as the use case of the usability in daily view, this would be where you would see your PRs and your issues, and then you could do inline comments with those. And so, yeah, you'd see those interlaced throughout this, and that would be the log, right? So
yeah, more or less. This is the free-form part of it, or semi-free-form part of it. Yeah, like the current stand-up stuff, which is like your PRs and stuff, all that stuff that's going on today, that might be segmented off to the side or something, but then you can bring this into the notebook. We're still kind of trying to figure out the UX of that.
And is the idea like, and again, this is multiple steps, but I mean, is the idea like if I could like create, and again, implementation detail, I realize, but like conceptually, like is the idea like I could have like, let's say we have like a pull request review, pull request set of rows of pull requests. And like eventually we could drag and drop enable that like row that if we drag that over to my notebook, the notebook will be smart enough to go, oh, when you drop it, I know what this entity thing is, a smart entity, and I know kind of like how to render that card, like this like notebook kind of thing. Is that how you're thinking about it?
Yeah, exactly. That's the goal, is because you have these different block types, and when you drag it in, just like we were talking about with images and stuff, like we'll try to figure that out.
So like a PR could be a specific block type that we go like, we know it's a PR and we know its ID and whatever, and then that block could be dynamic how we render the PR or the commit or the whatever, whatever that kind of smart thing was, which could include, kind of third-party things that might not be first-party things. It could include images or PDFs or whatever. Those just become new block types. Is that what you're saying?
Yep. That's exactly right.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's really cool. And on the notebook itself, Rick, one of the things that I do like about Notion is when you type in it, you don't necessarily get the editor right away. It becomes this kind of free form typing. So if you hit enter, it just creates a new block on the fly. Would there be a way that we could maybe minimize the component unless you are, you actually need the component UI unless you actually need it? I know it's a UI thing, just a kind of a UX experience thing. But if
Oh,
you're
you mean
typing
like when you click on this stuff, this Chrome here?
yeah, the
shows
Chrome
up?
showing up, and like one of the things that's kind of cool about Notion is if I like hit enter after a line, it goes to it actually just creates the next block, right? And so I can type very free form without having to worry about the
There's
Chrome.
no reason we can't do that. I mean, the only reason we were originally showing the Chrome was just kind of like in the compose area. We kind of needed to kind of teach the users what you could do and that it was an editable thing. But there's no reason, like in a different context, we have to show the Chrome, or you could show it in a different way, like only if you like, I don't know, hotkey it or something. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
I mean, we could, in fact, there's different toolbars. We just did this one this way, but I mean, in like the component we're using, you could do a floating toolbar. There's all kinds of different things we can do. I mean, we can control 100% of it. It's pretty easy to do.
Yeah.
We just need to kind of come up with the right UX. But I do agree. I like in this kind of context, more free form, just kind of make it more like a, document that I'm working on, not necessarily a composed block. I agree.
Very cool. When are we going to have it, Rick? Next week?
Tomorrow.
Sweet.
Great, because I'm talking with the customer about it right now. So
yeah, you already just sold
it. He already sold it. He sold it like a month ago. Are you kidding me?
Of course. Sold it before it was an idea, Rick. So there you go.
Exactly.
Go. I mean, I could jump into any technical details if you want to know, but that's the high level concept of what's going on.
It's awesome. Good progress.
Good stuff, man.
Awesome. Nice. Looking like making good progress there. So that's all from you, Rick. Anything else on Team 9 today?
Yeah, I can go. Let me.
Hey, Chris, we need to get at least one or two more things in your office by next week.
Yeah, that's fine.
We're gonna ship you a big guitar and another bike just to hang on the other side, just to kind of balance it out.
Get him a treadmill or something. So
all the camping stuff behind me as well. There's not a lot of room to move. Oh, I haven't shared on Zoom before.
Another box in there every time until it's just completely full.
It's the bottom middle, Chris.
Different colored box.
No, I haven't authorized it.
He's got to approve it, so it's going to bounce it out probably. I can switch back to mine while Chris is doing his authorization. All right, so let me go back to complete my demo here because that was completely unimpressive. Okay, so back to here, I'm gonna choose Atlassian. Let's go to our Jira. Okay, now I'm gonna click Begin Setup. And now if we come over here, I just paste in that URL it gave me, and then voila, look at that. Now, how beautiful is that? It went ahead and just did all the stuff for me, and it automatically, detected everything I needed, and I just hit continue. Give it a second, and it's going to do its thing, and voila, boom, Pinpoints created. And now, if I just close this browser and I come back over here, it automatically navigated to authorize. Now what that did is it created a link between Pinpoint and your Jira instance. So that allows us to communicate kind of securely, but kind of like you do in OAuth 2, but you have to kind of do this manual application link, but at least that flow was 100% automated. Now, if I hit grant permission, now you get this ugly, horrible dialogue, but we can't control that obviously because that comes from the Jira, in this case, provider. So I click allow, and then now I'm back in, I'm connected, and then boom. And so that will be at least that flow. It looks a little bit different for on-premise server because obviously it's a slightly different product from Jira's perspective, but the flow is exactly the same. The functionality works exactly the same. And we actually have a Jira server running in our edge environment right now that we're using for testing. But just to spare with time here, I won't demo that, but basically it's the exact same flow. So.
That's
As
awesome.
someone who has had to set up application links, it's super slick. And especially given that we'll have to have administrators, it's a no-brainer. There's not a lot of
Yeah, like I said,
cycles they have to put into it.
we even for us doing it and trying to test it, just we would try to set up application links. Every time I did it, I would screw it up. I mean, it's just so easy to screw it up, right? You forget to check the box, and you don't know why it doesn't work. It just doesn't work, right? I mean, so we tried to remove all the mistakes. Clearly, I'll just reload it real quick. Clearly, also I've got like a Notion document, here that, my thought is we would go through and right now it just goes to the knowledge center, but we would have a very specific Notion document, would have screenshots, and we could build out a flow if an administrator kind of wanted to see exactly everything that was happening from a documentation standpoint. But we tried to make it as dumb simple as we can. So.
You ready now, Chris?
No. My laptop won't let me do it. It's stuck.
Can you mime it, or
Yeah, maybe.
you can draw it on a piece of paper and show it to us?
There's a whiteboard. I suppose I could stick it on there. Yeah.
Chris, just
I'll save it.
instructions and I'll demo it.
Okay.
Cool.
Did you restart after you did the approval? Because usually you have to kind of restart Zoom.
No, it seems like system preferences has crashed.
Oh, that's always awesome.
Makes it difficult.
Yeah.
All right, we'll move on for a second then. Was there anyone else on Team Now, or anyone else in general who wanted to talk about anything or show anything today? Everyone's gone. All right, I guess.
All right, Chris. We're just so disappointed we couldn't get Chris to do his wonderful demo. We don't even know what it was with anticipation. It's so amazing.
Have to wait a week.
Okay. Oh man.
All right, I guess we're all in. I can share the recording after this.
Thanks, everyone.
Sounds good. Thanks, everybody.
Great day.
Bye.
Guys.
Right.